Dr. Donald Meichenbaum is a distinguished professor emeritus from the University of Waterloo, Ontario, from which he took early retirement 25 years ago. Since then, he has been the research director of the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention and the Treatment of Victims of Violence in Miami. And you can go to the melissainstitute.org to find out more about that. Dr. Meichenbaum is one of the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy, and in a survey of clinicians, he was voted one of the 10 most influential psychotherapists of the 20th century. He has received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Clinical Division of the American Psychological Association. He was the honorary president of the Canadian Psychological Association. He has presented in all of the Canadian provinces, in all 50 US states, and internationally. He has published extensively and has authored several books, including Roadmap to Resilience, that he has made available as a website for free. And you can all go to, I'll put the link there, Roadmap to Resilience .wordpress.com. And his most recent article, How to Spot Hype in the Field of Psychotherapy, was chosen the best article in the field of psychotherapy. His latest book, Treating Individuals with Addiction Disorders, a strengths-based workbook for patients and clinicians, is being published by Routledge Press. And that is quite the resume. And I have a feeling that that is very much only the tip of the iceberg after a lifetime of contribution to the field of psychotherapy. So again, welcome, Dr. Meichenbaum, and thank you so much for taking the time. Technological glitches and all. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me and for providing this opportunity to communicate with your audience, especially in this stressful time of losses and deaths of the worldwide pandemic. Let me just take a moment or two at the outset to give you a bit of a bio sketch. I should note that I'm about to celebrate my 80th birthday in the coming months. So I'm going to sort of pick up on what you said about my early retirement. I had been at the University of Waterloo in Ontario for 45 years. And my university brought in an early retirement package that I took advantage of. Now, if you've been there as long as I have for some 45 years and have made some kind of distinctive contribution, they give you this honorary title of Distinguished Professor Emeritus. So what's really important about that title is that with the title comes free parking, okay? Now, I've paid for 45 years, so I feel I am entitled. But for a moment, think of yourself as a university administrator, because while on the one hand, they give you free parking, on the other hand, they take away all your offices. So you get in, but you have no place to go. And you're part of the Alzheimer's set of professors who are equally excited about getting in and having no place to go. Good, get the walker, we'll go for coffee. This is exciting, okay? Now,
we'll park for free and then leave and go somewhere else.
Right, that's it. But if you live in Ontario and you retire, one of the things you do come the winter is you go to Florida. So you drive to Detroit, get on I-75, and follow the tropism of Ontario plates down to Florida like lemons going to the sea. But what takes me to Florida is not just the escaping of the winter in Ontario. I am the research director, as you noted, of the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention. So let me just tell you a little bit about that. Melissa was indeed a very bright, attractive young lady who's going to undergraduate school at St. Louis at Washington University. And on Cinco de Mayo Day, she was carjacked and brutally murdered. Now, when such a tragedy like that befalls an individual, their family, friends, the community at large, one of the ways that people cope with trauma, which I've been heavily involved in, is to transform their pain into something good that will come of it. So Melissa's parents, with the support of a number of other citizens in the community of Miami, decided to develop an institute in her name that's designed to address the issues of violence and the treatment of victims of violence. Now, the Melissa Institute is not a direct hands-on providing direct services to individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, apropos of this presentation and others, it is designed to give science away. So the Melissa Institute does an annual conference each year. We're up to our 25th. It does consultation locally. And moreover, it does give away scholarships to graduate students. So while I'm going to address your questions about ways to bolster resilience, I want to encourage your audience to in fact visit www.melissainstitute.org, because I have online at least 45 papers on how to bolster resilience in high-risk children and their families,
Yes.
in adolescents like LGBTQ, in victims of human trafficking, in adults, on trauma therapists, and on the elderly. Okay. So even though I will share with you this material, not only that, there are a number of other contributors in the area of resilience, major figures in the field, like Ann Maston, Betty Pfefferdow, Marlene Wong, and Scott Miller, many others. And all of the material that we are going to discuss today that is on the Melissa Institute, as well as my Roadmap to Resilience book, okay? This book is set up in such a way that it's sort of like a mini computer. So I have decided that I am in a generativity phase of life, that I'm really concerned about how to help people in this critical time. So I have transformed the book into a free website that people can go on to, and that we have put together for the Melissa Institute subsequent materials that will be of help. So that's all by way of introduction, and now I'm in your hands, Julia, to address any questions you would like.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. So everything in the Roadmap to Resilience book is free at that website.
Correct.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for providing that.
So here's something really fascinating, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That website has been on for 28 days. Okay, 28 days. In those 28 days, I have had 12,000 visitors to the website from 87 countries. In fact, I just got Tanzania, a visitor, okay? And that has resulted in 50,000 viewers.
Wow.
So the internet is unbelievable. In Canada, for instance, I am scheduled to do an entire webinar for Jack Hiroshi, who's in Vancouver. He does workshops.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He sent out my website to the 30,000 mental health workers in Canada. In 2 days, 10,000 visitors came from Canada. So, I'm going to do this 2-day workshop for him that will be online, and you'll be notified of it. So you can get a full day of that presentation as well, Julia.
So all about teaching resilience, because isn't that what we all want right now? Like we all just are like, we want to bounce back. And I think that is such the theme that is happening. We're like, this is what's happening in the world. This is what's happening in our lives. This is hard. This is challenging. This is pushing us in ways that we didn't realize we were going to be pushed. And and a lot of us are feeling down, and we want to be able to bounce back. And that's the work that you do, is teaching us and talk about resilience is becoming more bouncy. And that's what you do,
so
Dr. Meichenbaum.
One of the things interesting is that I would even say it goes beyond bouncing back. Okay. But rather it's dealing with ongoing adversities. And one of the things that's quite fascinating is that if you look at individuals who have been traumatized, victimized, who experienced the pandemic, one of the things I address in the Roadmap to Resilience book is that while most people are impacted by these kinds of stressful events, these losses, these accompanying deaths and the like, 75% of the folks will be impacted, but go on to evidence resilience, and in fact, in some instances, even evidence what's called post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
25% of people get stuck. That is, they may experience PTSD or anxiety or depression or other kinds of clinical problems. So one of the things that becomes really interesting is what is it that distinguishes the 25% versus the 75%? And how can we be impacted in that way? Now, as I answer that question for you and your audience, it is important to know that resilience and post-trauma distress often co-occur. These are not either-or events. Moreover, people may be resilient in one domain and not in other domains of their lives. They may be resilient at one time, but not at other times. So resilience is really a very kind of fluid process. Okay?
Yeah.
I would add one other note, if I may, in anticipating the questions that you're going to be asking.
Yes.
Is when people experience trauma, severe trauma, as Bessel van der Kolk and others have described, the body keeps score. Especially if, for example, in children, they've experienced multiple adverse childhood experiences. There is clear evidence that there are neurological and psychosocial sequelae or changes therein. But here's the good news. The good news is that the brain also keeps score of engaging in resilience engendering behaviors.
Yes.
That there's increasing data that the brain is your most plastic organ in the body. And that by engaging in a whole variety of specific resilience engendering behaviors that we'll discuss, you can not only transform yourself from being a victim into being a thriver, into being a survivor and then a thriver, but you could do a variety of things that we know have beneficial impact.
Can we talk about those? Can we talk specifically about the 25% and the 75%? What makes the 75% able to bounce back in the face of adversity, and why do 25% get stuck?
Okay, yeah, no, that's an area I've devoted much of my research career and clinical practice. So let's start off by how do you get stuck in the 25%? Because if we can figure that out, then maybe we can be better informed on ways to bolster resilience. So one of the things we know, and I've included this in the Roadmap to Resilience, you'll find it online as well, is I can give you an algorithm. So God forbid something bad happens to you, okay? In terms of the pandemic or losses or stressful events or other kinds of victimization. In order to stay in the 25% group, you have to have a certain kind of mindset. See, Julia, we're not only Homo sapiens. Each of us, including you, are what I call a Homo narran. A Homo narran is a storyteller. See, PTSD is essentially a disorder of non-recovery. Most people will recover. So to stay in the 25% group, you have to tell yourself a story, as well as tell others, about some kind of traumatic, victimizing, stressful event that occurred in the distant past or the recent past. And what I'm going to highlight for you and your audience is that the nature of the story you tell yourself, the mindset you have, will go a long way in determining your level of adjustment. So in order to be in the 25%, I'll just enumerate a few items. And you can read more about the research that supports them on the papers that I have listed on the Melissa Institute website. So one of the things you have to do is see yourself as a victim. You have to have that kind of mindset. Not only that, when really bad things happen to people, Language is often inadequate to describe what they've been through. That is, they become poets of sorts. You know, they say, you know what, Julia, I'm really a prisoner of the past. I'm damaged goods, okay? You know, I'm a pariah, okay? There's no hope. It's hopeless. I'm overwhelmed. So one of the things that becomes interesting is that these are not just figures of speech. You can imagine what is the psychological, physiological sequelae of going around telling yourself that you're a prisoner of the past, that you're a pariah. One of the things that would be valuable to stay in the 25% is to ruminate. You can't really have psychopathology unless you dwell on things. You know, the mind loves to hang around in the past and be preoccupied with the uncertainty of the future. That's where your mindfulness comes in. You know, not only that, one of the things that would help you stay in the 25% group is to not share your story. There's data to indicate that if people don't share their accounts of what they've been through with others, and note the sharing does not only have to be verbal, it doesn't even have to be with a therapist. It may be even in the form of art expressive techniques or some other kind of format that you use. It turns out that sharing, where you have a beginning, middles, and ends, change the nature of the thinking processes you engage in. You're less likely to fall into thinking traps. Another kind of thing that becomes important to stay in that group is to have perfectionistic standards. Perfectionistic standards are a really good way to get yourself depressed, okay? Another one is to not seek social supports. Social supports are the main kind of building block towards being in the 75% group. You have to give to get. You have to reach out. And in the attempt to be altruistic towards others, you're often healing yourself. Another thing to do is to dwell on negative emotions. Positive emotions like gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, humor, a sense of awe, love. All of those change the brain, change your interactions. Hopefully you're starting to get a feel for what gets people stuck in that 25% group. Some people in the 25% group even self-medicate. You know, they may use substances of one form or another. They may engage in risk-taking behavior. They may engage in face-saving behaviors.
Right. Which, as we
And
know,
therefore, that gets them to stay in the 25% group.
Well, and so much that comes with substance abuse can create re-traumatization through what often happens when there is severe addiction issues happening, that it can just be perpetuating trauma, not only not healing it, but also compounding it. Yeah?
Right. And, you know, in the book that's forthcoming by Rutledge, the one I wrote on treating individuals with substance abuse and co-occurring disorders, I take you through what you need to do to develop lasting changes.
Okay.
Substance abuse is a topic I've consulted a lot to various addiction centers. 75% of people who have gone through treatment will relapse. 50% drop out of treatment. So the name of the game for people who have substance abuse issues is how do you achieve lasting changes? But that's a topic that could be an interview unto itself later on.
All right, I'll mark that down for next time.
So let's just talk about the 75% group.
Yes.
So there are multiple pathways to resilience. There's no magic bullet, okay? And on the website, I have identified 6 different fitness areas that people can go through. These are, and I'll take you through each one in turn, is physical, interpersonal, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and finally spiritual. It turns out that the major way that people in North America cope with trauma, okay, is to engage in some form of spirituality, religion, or meaning-making activity. Think about how the Melissa Institute came to be, and how did people transform their pain? How did Mothers Against Drunk Drivers? How does the Museum in Memory of the Holocaust? How did these spiritual and ritual behaviors have a therapeutic impact. So let me walk you and your listeners through, if I may, the 6 domains, okay?
Please.
And when your visitors go to the website that I put together, they will be able to see a whole list of these activities. So on the physical, one of the major issues is sleep behavior. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, that makes you more vulnerable. Your fuse is shorter. So if you go to Appendix A, Item 3, there is a detailed game plan on how to monitor and improve sleep behavior.
Amazing.
Another key element is exercise. Exercise in one form or another has an impact on the neurotransmitters of the brain and reduces depression. Self-care, diet, and the like are all key building blocks to keep you in that 75% group. There are others enumerated there as well. As we move on to the second category, which is interpersonal, I've already indicated to you that you need to give to get, okay? So one of the things that becomes interesting, especially in this time of the pandemic, is I don't like to call it social distancing, okay? It's really physical distancing that we should keep in mind, that 6-foot kind of distance from significant others. So one of the things that becomes interesting is how can you maintain social contact with others by means of Skype or Zoom, by means of reaching out in some chat line, in some kind of other format. Think of how people celebrate frontline nurses and doctors. Why at 7 o'clock, at least in the East Coast, they're all coming out. They're dancing, they're singing, they're applauding. Recognizing that you're part of a community. That stay at home is your way of giving back to others. So when I wear a mask, I'm not only doing it for myself, I'm doing it for my sense of commitment to you and to our society. The degree to which you can make a donation, give blood, buy groceries for someone. Okay? You're not only giving to them, but you're receiving so much in return. Loneliness, social isolation is one of the most high-risk factors that will put you in the 25% group. In fact, if you go to the piece that I put together on how to bolster resilience in the elderly, one of the things that you will find there is that social isolation and loneliness is more high risk to a mortality than smoking and the lack of exercise.
Wow.
That with that depression comes suicidality, which is increasing. The other thing that the Melissa Institute is focusing in on heavily now is the possibility of increased likelihood of domestic violence or spouse abuse. That is a byproduct of shelter in place, of stay at home. So your visitors can now see the initiative that the Melissa Institute will be taking in that particular domain as well. What am I doing? I'm trying to give your audience an enumeration of the building blocks that help people engage and become a member of that 75% group.
Yes.
We've covered physical and interpersonal. When it comes to emotional, one of the things that's fascinating is that almost anything that results in people engaging in non-negative thinking. So think of what's getting people stuck in the 25% group. So if you can engage in an incompatible behavior, and almost anything will work. You could do mindfulness training. But there's evidence with returning soldiers, because they were the ones who I built the Roadmap to Resilience book on. Some of them get better by having pets, by raising canaries, by swimming with the dolphins, by doing hikes. Now, why should all of those diverse activities be beneficial. What do all of those activities have in common? And what they have in common is they reduce the likelihood of you engaging in, as a storyteller, into the kind of negative ideational content that keeps you in the 25% group.
Okay.
So in terms of emotions, the question is, how do you regulate negative emotions? How do you tolerate, accept? How do you name and tame those emotions? Okay? How do you label it and see how no emotion is going to last forever? Okay? So there are a number of emotion regulation activities that are on the Roadmap to Resilience website. But that's only one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, how do you bolster positive emotions? What's your bucket list? And can you have positive emotions when you have to stay in place with 3 kids? When you have to cook the meals? When you have to work at home? Okay? So one of the things that becomes interesting is, how do you negotiate those tasks? What's the mindset you have in terms of cognitive? So here I want to introduce a concept of a sort of 2x2 box, if I may. Okay? Think of stressful events as falling into 1 or 2 categories. There are those stressful events that are changeable, hopefully, that have the potential of you're doing something. But there may be some stressful events that are unchangeable. That's one of my 2x2s. The other side of the box is that you could take some kind of direct actions to try and change things. Or you could use what is called palliative coping things, like your faith, like distraction, like mindfulness. Now, here's the challenge. Those people who are likely to be in the 25% group have often a mismatch between which kind of coping strategy they use, either direct action and palliative, with which kind of stressful event they have, potentially changeable or unchangeable. At this point, it's worth keeping in mind the Serenity Prayer that is often used in 12-step programs.
Yes.
And that goes, God, grant me the serenity to accept those things that cannot be changed, and the courage to change that which is changeable. And most importantly, to know the wisdom that distinguishes these two.
Amen.
Having the wrong coping strategy against the specific kind of stressful event will exacerbate your distress. And then behaviorally, this should translate into some kind of problem solving, some kind of collaborative work with others. In fact, I don't know if this applies to you, but in the section on behavioral, there's a whole section on how to get along better with your spouse.
I think that applies to some people here today.
Okay, so here's a good one for you, okay? At that Anaheim conference that you were referring to by Jeff Zeig, and they're going to be doing that again next December, hopefully, and I'll be there. I hope to see you there, okay? So Jeff Zeig put together a book called The 10 Commandments for a Happy Marriage. You want to call your husband in for this?
He's with the kids in the other room, but I'll get him to watch the recording.
This segment, have him read this element, okay?
All right.
Okay. So Zeig put together this book called The 10 Commandments for a Happy Marriage. And he invited every major couples therapist to contribute. You know, Sue Johnson, the Gottman, all these people, okay? Yeah. And then he asked me to contribute. I didn't want to contribute. I don't know. I've been married for 55 years. I don't know.
What do you know? You've only had a good marriage for 55 years.
Okay, so here is my 10 Commandments for a happy marriage. You ready? Commandment 1, edit. Do not say every thought that goes through your head to your partner. Okay? Commandment 2, do commandment 1 as often as humanly possible. Okay? Commandments 3 to 10 have been edited out. So if you go to Zeig's book, okay, all of these other therapists have like pages and pages of advice. You go to Meichenbaum, and on this whole big page are these 3 commandments, okay? So there are a variety of ways to show empathy, to listen, to be compassionate, to not be a surrogate frontal lobe for your significant others, okay? And doing those behaviors are likely to call for reciprocal behaviors on the part of others. So there are a variety of things on the website that you could do in that particular domain. The last one is spiritual.
Okay.
Those people who have a spiritual struggle, who are angry at God or angry at someone. Anger interferes with the processing of traumatic memories. There are different kinds of spiritual coping techniques, and Pargamet and others I've reviewed in the website. So if you relinquish autonomy to a higher power and expect those to be helpful, that is unlikely to be a useful coping strategy. Remember, God helps those who help themselves. So one of the things that becomes interesting is the degree to which you can find meaning, the degree to which you can find a purpose,
Yes.
the degree to which you have a moral compass that you could find. One of the things that's on the website is a 5-day workshop, 2 5-day workshops that people can download. One is an extensive 100-page handout on how to incorporate spirituality in psychotherapy. The other is an extensive handout workshop on how to cope with prolonged and complicated grief and traumatic bereavement. In fact, in the aftermath of the tragic shooting outside Halifax in Nova Scotia,
Just the other week. Yeah.
Where this tragedy befalls all these families and communities, I have passed along to the mental health workers there this entire checklist. I have a checklist in this handout, and it's also in the website, on ways that people have coped with grief. There's no right or wrong way to cope with grief. But I have enumerated from those we've worked with various kinds of coping tools that people have used.
Okay.
Your audience and those they serve can go to the Melissa Institute under Emotions and actually download that checklist.
Amazing. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
So, and I think that that's such a fitting topic, because I've talked about this a couple times with my people here on grief, and how what we're dealing with a lot in this global pandemic, in this huge shift in our way of being, is I think we're dealing with a collective sense of grief. Just as people who have lost, and even if we haven't lost a loved one, even if our lives are relatively okay, we've lost a lot. And I think that we're grieving. What do you think?
I share your observation. So it's not only loss of a loved one, like happened in Nova Scotia, okay? But it's loss of a dream. You know, just think of all of those high school seniors who have lost the moment that they look forward to in terms of a graduation. Think of all those people who have the potential loss of employment, of businesses, of social contacts. My 3 grandchildren live in a stone's throw from where my wife and I live.
Mm.
So here's our debate. Do we go over there for Mother's Day? Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a high risk? You know, we're senior citizens. Even though they have been essentially homebound, they have been out and around, whether it's shopping or activities for their kids or driving somewhere to get a. So here is the dilemma, you know, and even if we go there and they put us at another table, right, and we go in with mask, take off the mask when we eat, we have lost that moment of intimacy, that hug. So your observation about grief, sadness, being, if in fact you are not grieving, given these situations, I would be deeply, deeply concerned. In fact, you need to realize that the nature of the emotions, whether it's grief or anxiety or fear, given the uncertainty of how long is this going to last, right? It's not like we have an event like a natural disaster, we know it's over and we can start rebuilding, okay? Not only that, there are threats that there may be a resurgence in the fall with not only the coronavirus, but with the flu as well, okay? So the question is not that you feel with these emotions. The key aspect is, what do you do with those emotions?
That's the question of the hour.
Think of the emotions as a commodity that you do something with. If you stuff the emotions, if you try to drink the emotions away, if you fail to share the emotion, if you fail to name and tame the emotion, if you fail to accept, tolerate, okay, regulate the emotions, that'll keep you in the 25% group. To have those emotions at this time is a human event.
Yes. Absolutely. That's what's part of being human. In times of uncertainty, we have emotions about it. We have thoughts about it. We have feelings about it. And just from a cognitive perspective, can you offer anything as far as cognitive strategies for, you know, we mindfully and radically accept all of human experience and the emotions that we're feeling, but then also the taming part of it. So how do we keep our brains from going down those spirals, down those rabbit holes, and keeping us stuck in the 25%? How do we do the thought work to get us into the 75% resilience?
That's a challenging question, and the answer will be individually tailored.
Okay.
I don't have a magic bullet or an algorithm, but what I do have is a game plan.
Okay.
A game plan that goes with a mindset. So if you want to change behavior, one of the key ingredients is you have to increase your awareness of it. You have to notice that emotional state. You have to look at your behavior. You have to ask others, be able to listen to them saying, hey, you have a problem here. And instead of denying or avoiding or reframing that event, okay, you have to sort of recognize it and then see it as a problem to be solved and addressed, or ways in which you could accept it and go with the flow. So the game plan is you don't change behavior unless you increase the awareness. You have to break the kind of habitual pattern that occurs over and over again. When you get to the website, you'll see that I have included a whole variety of emotion regulation techniques.
Amazing.
Okay. And in those are finding a way to get an instead of behavior. That is, if in fact you're withdrawing, what would be the alternative? And insofar as you can engage in that kind of alternative behavior, that will impact. Keep in mind that on every emotion, there's another side to the coin, which is the nature of the thinking processes. So in the same way that emotions affect thinking, so if you're depressed, you tend to call up other depressogenic thoughts and examples. Okay? But if you have a thinking process that says, I'm a victim, I'm hopeless, there's nothing that can do, it's going to get worse. Okay? Remember, you're a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
To have dysfunctional emotions, you have to tell yourself and other people a certain kind of story. So can you, and you'll see this in the thing, use what I call RE verbs. RE verbs are terrific. So can you reauthor? Can you reframe? Can you renew? Okay. So when you go to the website, there's going to see how many times in your storytelling do you include RE verbs? How many times in your storytelling do you use what is called change talk? I will, I can, I must, okay? How many times in your storytelling do you include the language of possibilities, or what is called future talk? So insofar as you can monitor and impact keep in mind that we are not mere victims of circumstances or of feelings. Clients come in and say, I'm depressed, there's nothing I can do. Okay? So the key question is, tell me about the nature of your depression. When is it worse? When does it tend to improve? What have you done in the past to handle depression? What, if anything, can you do now?
Yes.
So I'm a clinician. So this is how I operate. And I'll conclude with this, if I may. So someone comes in and sees me as a therapist. You know what I do? I get paid to listen to people's stories. Now, psychotherapy is not something really sexy. People come in and tell you their story. You wouldn't believe what my life is like. I'm doing Facebook and it goes down glitch. I'm right in the middle of it and it goes bad, okay? I got my husband with the 3 kids. I got to go up and get dinner, okay? He's not going to get the dinner, okay? I got to do this all by myself. Not only that, I got all these people who are counting on me and I'm screwing up. They're waiting and waiting and here I can't even find the goddamn button, okay? Am I getting...
I have no idea what you're talking about right now. No idea.
So I get paid to listen to your story, right? Okay. And then I say to you, given that story, how would you like things to be?
Yeah.
Okay. And you may tell me, I can get someone who knows how to run this equipment. Okay. I can get someone else to get the dinner. We can get dinner out. Okay. You can tell me what you're going to do to negotiate that task. And then I'm going to say, so what have you tried in the past? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Okay. It worked as evident by, okay? And Julia, if we work together, and I hope we can, how would we know if we're making progress?
Yes.
What would we see changed? What would other people notice? And Julia, let me ask one last question. Can you foresee, can you envision anything that might get in the way of your doing this? Note that every question I just asked you is a what and how question.
Yeah.
So, Julia, I'm not even going to charge you for this therapeutic session. Okay? Instead, please go to roadmaptoresilience.wordpress.com and you can get all of this for free. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here. I've seen videos of you working with clients, and you can tell the greats by not only their brains and in the way that they create and understand and consolidate knowledge and information, but then also how they work with their clients. And I've seen videos of you and you just lock right in to those human beings. And is there anything, I think there are a few things more healing than that, than being felt truly seen and acknowledged and validated and understood and led and encouraged by another human being. And I've seen you do that, and you've just done
That's
that
very nice of you.
today.
Let me just add on. It turns out that the quality of the therapeutic alliance is 5 times more important than any specific procedure that the therapist uses.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
here's your last laugh for the day. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I consult as part of the Melissa Institute and present to various groups. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was asked to present at the local veterans hospital. And the task for me was to help them draw a differential diagnosis between returning soldiers who have traumatic brain injury because they've been exposed to improvised explosive devices, IEDs, versus PTSD or the combination therein. Okay? So that turns out to be a very difficult and challenging differential diagnosis. So here I am, having done a hell of a lot of homework to address that question. And I'm now presenting to several hundred people at the VA. And they're videoing me to other VAs. Now, in my haste to get through this, Julia, I have an inadvertent faux pas. Okay? This is a true story. So I say to the group that one of the challenges that the mental health community has to confront is that they have returning soldiers who have traumatic brain injury because they've been exposed, and this is where the faux pas came through. I say they've been exposed to exploding IUDs, okay? And that this impacts their entire ability to cope and their social relationships. Now, every once in a while, I hear a little snicker, okay?
Yeah.
And I figure it's my New York accent. But I have so much material that I keep going on saying IUDs instead of IEDs, okay? At the end of the presentation, the psychiatric nurse comes up to me and says, Dr. Meichenbaum, can I give you a little feedback on your presentation? And I say, I always welcome feedback, okay? And she says, of all the problems that they're encountering in a combat zone, least likely is an exploding intrauterine device. And I said, what are you talking about? And she says, you kept saying IUDs instead of IEDs. And I said, no way, I've never, what are you? And the chief psychiatrist looked at me and said, 5 times, okay? And then I said to him, well, this is really a long-term problem for me because I presented in Salt Lake City at Brigham Young University. Now, Brigham Young University in Salt Lake City is a Mormon school. They are the Church of the Latter-day Saints, the LDS.
Yeah.
My entire presentation, I called them the LSD Church. I said, really? I said, if you're a member of the LSD Church, it changes your whole outlook, your sense of reality and so forth, okay? So,
it definitely does.
Right. So one of the things that becomes interesting is that your audience are invited to email me at dhmike, M-E-I-C-H, at AOL.com.
I'll put that up here as well.
Right. And if they email me, they cannot use any acronyms. Thank you for your interest and support.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you everyone for joining us. And again, a lot of people put the links up to Dr. Meichenbaum's sites and work, the Melissa Institute and the Roadmap to Resilience. I'll put those in the description as well. You can make sure that you grab those, and he has so much to give and is giving it all the way for free to everyone. So grab those resources, those life-changing resources. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, Julia, it's time to make dinner.
All right.
Send me the tape.
I will, absolutely. And take care, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.